you, my friend. I think what you're doing is already a huge step. Validating who they are, believing who your children are when they tell you. Continue to set boundaries with them as you need to for appropriate parenting, and to know that the reason I see so many young people become addicted or really struggle with the impact of trauma is because parents, often religious parents, often traditional parents, will say, no, it's just a phase, or you're growing out of it. So, I mean, my heart is warmed to hear somebody from my part of the world honor their children as they are. I think you're on the right track, and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you, my friend.
Thank
Your work is fueled by that. I will say for a lot of us who dissociate, work is where we're at our best. Like, that's very much been my case. So I would say there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just knowing in the other areas of your life, where can it show up? And the consistency may be, even if it feels like you can't necessarily get into a daily routine because of the unpredictability of your illness, the consistency can maybe be committing to a practice where, especially since you said, polyvagal, you really listen to your body cues. You maybe have a plan. When I feel XYZ, this is what I will do.
Yeah.
Me, that's still consistency. So hope that's helpful in some way. And I start with. So much of the heart of my work in Trauma and the 12 Steps, the book and the workbook, is go through the steps themselves. Start with the steps, because I think a lot of what gets brought into meetings is not really a part of the steps. It's people's opinions. And, I like the saying that you can take what you like and leave the rest when you go to meetings. There are a lot of meetings I don't take seriously anymore because of a lot of the shaming and the rigidity that happens there. So maybe really think of that slogan, take what you like and leave the rest. Something I did in early recovery was I would go to meetings and I would keep a notebook and log at least one positive thing I heard in every meeting. And then maybe notice where I was triggered or bothered by a meeting, and realize it's not a religion. You don't have to believe everything you hear at a meeting. And like something I do in the Trauma and the 12 Steps work, both the workbook and in the main text, is if you don't like a term like character defects, if that's what's really rubbing you the wrong way, how can you modify the language? Or is there a term from your native language that might work a little better? Because something I actually learned in Workaholics Anonymous is you can replace character defects with negative coping skills. These are the things we developed really as a trauma response. So hope you find that helpful. And any of you who feel like my aggression, my sexual acting out, my whatever it may be, if it feels connected to an unhealed wound, you're probably right. It probably is. And even though I know that professional therapy is not always available to us, especially where we're at in the world, it is your right to search for a therapist who really understands that human behavior, problematic human behavior, can be connected to trauma responses, and to see what individualized solutions they can offer you. Because we're getting a lot of good generalized questions, but a lot of this is, I don't know your individual stories to really be able to give strategies. All I will say in general is, if you think there's a connection, there probably is. Remember that trauma means wound. And so often our wound care has been taught to us as like, well, let's put the Band-Aid on it, as opposed to let's name it for what it is, and then develop some kind of plan of action, which can be different for different people. Like You may benefit really well from intense trauma therapy. Other people really find the healing power just in sharing it with another human being that they trust at a meeting, or diving into artwork or writing or poetry or other spiritual practice that feels healthy. I think they mentioned at the beginning my website, redefinetherapy.com. You can go there. You can go to traumamadesimple.com as well. And if you want to share those in the links, Patrick, again, you can, because just about everything I've done on a complimentary basis online is there that helps give you some further solutions here. But fundamentally, you will have to tailor it to your individual story or experience. It could be, because I want to be clear, when a lot of people give me questions like this, I don't want to give absolutes, because I don't know your partner or your former partner. I don't know you to know, but it could be. And instead of, we don't really use the terminology split personality anymore. It's more kind of an old school way of thinking of it. But yes, I mean, a dissociative response could involve not remembering things because that was another protective part. One thing I will say to any of you who thinks that you might be dealing with a partner who dissociates, and I have a chapter specifically addressing this in Dissociation Made Simple, is to realize that people's dissociative tendencies like that are generally happening for a reason. They're either protecting themselves or they're meeting a need. And like with dealing with an addictive partner, it's up to you to decide if you want to work with it, to engage with it, or whether that's not a good relationship fit for you. Just know that it's not about ever using it against a person if you think you are dealing with a dissociative response. But maybe if that feels like what it's going on, how can you use it to better understand them or inform how you want to proceed in the relationship? That is up for debate right now even is going no contact the way to go for you? And I want to say sometimes for us that can feel inaccessible. It can feel like that's something we don't want to do, like it creates more stress for us. I think at the end of the day, you have a right to take care of yourself, no matter how that looks. And I mean, sometimes we have this need to stay in contact with our family because it is cultural messaging, because it is a trauma bond, because we feel like it's the right thing to do. And I would say, be willing to explore that, be willing to work on that as part of your healing or your recovery, instead of saying, well, I have to go no contact, or I have to stay in contact with them. Like we've been in various places over the years with our family. Like right now, we're no contact with our dad. We've been no contact a few other places, but we've sometimes, come back into contact. So I don't think it has to be absolute. But fundamentally, it is doing what is best for you and your recovery, because I do believe we have to prioritize that. Working on mine right now, but it's not available now. I mean, and even religious issues, those can be various depending on what your church or denomination was. I mean, a classic in the field was called Leaving the Fold by Marlene Winnell. If your church trauma was very much related to sexuality and purity culture, there's another good book called Church 2. It's like the hashtag Church 2. By Emily Allison, which is amazing. Another one of my favorites is called Post-Traumatic Church Syndrome by Rebecca Riley. So those are three of my particular favorites. I mean, that's been part of our story too. And I think whatever healing practices you do, continue to do those. And because a couple of the questions that came through even in chat is like, how do I make someone understand this? How do I, and it's a lesson I'm still learning, that we are only fundamentally responsible for ourselves. And if you have guilt, I'm glad you are naming it. Can you feel that through? Can you feel that through with somebody who feels safe enough for you? And I'm going to tie this to the first part of your question. I'm actually going to recommend you not read a book on the issue, because a lot of head people can always get into the, well, is there a book? Is there a resource? Is there this, they're this? Maybe, and this is just for everybody, but I'm glad you brought the question up. Maybe, and I'm an author. I mean, it's in my interest to sell books, but there are sometimes I'm like, maybe you don't need one more book. Maybe the answer here really is to let yourself feel this. And I know we validate how intimidating and how big that can be. And this is where sponsorship, therapy, online support group like this, can you find one other person to witness it in such a way? Taking those walks where you're with nature, because I know that's where we often feel our deceased loved ones when we're out in nature or connecting. So, or social media people. But one of my TikToks I did was, don't buy my book. Like, yeah, I love to write books if you find them useful to help. But if you think like it's just going to be one more book that'll give you the instant answer, it probably won't, because a lot of it is, can you use the books and the knowledge to help you connect to the feeling? Knowing that your thoughts, you can talk yourself in or out of anything, but feeling the drink through is like what I imagined, like linking the two feeling states, really being willing to go in at the body, maybe even doing something like this, making that string from, ooh, the real pleasant association with drinking to the, ugh, I'm puking in the bathroom type of feeling. This is part of what feeling it through more at the body level is what I'm referencing, as opposed to just thinking it. Even visualizing can be a little more powerful than just thinking. And, in some, and I think this is a good place to wrap this up, remember what Janet told me, and this to me is the heart of trauma or dissociation informing recovery. Now that you know, there's a link between your trauma and your dissociation and this addiction, what are you going to do with that information? I mean, I believe very firmly that when we talk about trauma and dissociation, and I'm not saying you or anyone else is doing this, but I really want us to consider this just as a whole. Knowing that it's trauma or dissociation should not ever be an excuse or a reason that we drink. But it's like, now that you know, what do you do with the information? So once I feel my body in these certain states, I now know, okay, it's taking the walk. It's taking a glass of water. Like this morning, I had a horrible morning because there were so many things happening at one time. Repair person was coming to our house. The dog was barking, was dealing with a lot of things personally. And sometimes for me, it's as simple as, can I take the pause and just have my drink of water instead of feeling like I have to push it through. So I'm glad that I know that. Even my partner can be very supportive in that process. Like somebody asked about partnership. And, can we make our partners understand? I don't think we could ever make our partners understand, but something I'm grateful my partner knows is when I get this way, sometimes what I most need is just that glass of water.